Bo Nickal just made his way into the rankings and is now currently ranked number 15 at the time of this recording. And before I continue with the video, if you do enjoy it, please like it and subscribe in advance. Then if you don't enjoy it, you can unlike and unsubscribe at the end of the video because it really helps my channel. Anyway, let me go on. A lot of people may feel like he doesn't deserve to be ranked number 15, and understandably so. But I'm personally happy they pushed him up to that ranking because I want to see him face some real competition. There are a lot of other people that some might argue are more deserving of his position, like Shara Magomedov. When you look at the opponent Shara has faced and compare it to Bo Nickal, Shara obviously wins there. A lot of people may say he fought Cans, but who else is he going to fight? Because when you look at the rankings outside of the top 15, there aren't that many skilled fighters, hence them not being in the top 15. So I think Bo Nickal has faced a lot of competition that isn't very good, but at the same time, you can't really blame him for it. UFC fighters aren't matchmakers, so they don't have complete control over who they get to fight. And let's be honest, the UFC sees Bo Nickal as marketable, so they're going to continue to match him up against Cans until he gets a title shot. How much do you want to bet his next fight is going to be Michel Pereira? And then shortly after that, he's only going to be 2 or 1 fight away from a title shot. And he's going to get that title shot and potentially win. Because one thing I will say about Bo Nickal is that he is good and he has a lot of room for improvement. But looking at his current version, I don't think he can beat some of these top 5 guys. And I think he knows this, but he still continues to boast and brag about how he can beat guys like Khamzat, he can beat Izzy and Alex Pereira just because he has a wrestling background. I remember in his post-fight interview after beating Paul Craig, either this interview or another one, he said that he doesn't feel ready to fight the better guys. He still feels like there's some areas where he needs to improve. And rightfully so, because he went to a decision with Paul Craig. He didn't implement his grappling against him. So what would happen if he would have faced someone who's an even better grappler than Paul Craig? Guys like Anthony Hernandez. Anthony may not have the jiu-jitsu that Paul Craig has to a certain degree or in certain instances, but at the same time, Anthony Hernandez is a pretty good grappler, and there's a high chance he would beat Bo Nickal. I'm saying this because freestyle wrestling is not the same as MMA wrestling. MMA is a sport where BJJ black belts get submitted, where glory champions get knocked out. So just because someone has a good wrestling background, it doesn't mean they're going to be able to carry over that success into MMA. Yoel Romero is a great example of that. He was an Olympic silver medalist. He achieved more than even Bo Nickal did. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's the better wrestler because it doesn't mean they face the same competition. Just because someone won a gold medal and the other one didn't, it doesn't mean that the one with the gold medal is a better wrestler because we don't know the competition they faced to get that medal in the first place. And there obviously is a skill gap between different weight classes, so it remains a mystery. I would have to do my research on that. But Yoel Romero wasn't able to really implement his wrestling in MMA. He became a striker. People don't even believe this guy comes from a wrestling background. And the times when he did try to wrestle, it didn't really work as well as we would have expected it to. Look at Robert Whittaker, for instance. Robert has wrestled before, but he doesn't have as many accomplishments as Yoel Romero, yet he was the one winning the grappling exchanges. He had good defensive wrestling. He was able to get back on his feet and use his striking, which won him these decisions. Austin Bashi is another great example of that. Going into his fight against Christian Rodriguez, he was the favorite, and a lot of people thought he was going to ragdoll C-Rod for 3 rounds straight. Why? Because we've seen him wrestle in his DWCS fight, and he looked pretty good. But we have to remember that C-Rod was the same guy that beat Raul Rosas Jr. So he's known for beating undefeated prospects, and that's what he did when he faced Austin Bashi. Austin would take him down and control him, but he wouldn't really do any damage. And he lost every single round because when things were on the feet, C-Rod had so much success and Austin Bashi had none because of the reach disadvantage that he had and striking disadvantage in general. So wrestlers aren't really as dangerous as they once were, and Bo Nickal might just be a great example of that. And don't get me wrong, his first 4 UFC fights were very impressive. All of them were first round finishes, and we got to really study just how he fights. One thing that I've realized is that he throws a lot of feints, which is very impressive for someone who doesn't come from a striking background. And they're very efficient. Watch his fight against Val Woodburn and you'll notice that they were both throwing feints. But whose feints were more convincing? Obviously Bo Nickal. Bo would feint the jab, feint the takedown over and over again to have him thinking about a takedown. And then he eventually threw an overhand that connected. And then he threw an overhand while attempting a takedown. And he had Val thinking about his rear hand the whole time. Little did he know, Bo Nickal also has a lead hand. So he darted in with his lead hand and threw a hook that rocked Val. leading up to the finishing sequence. I know this wasn't the best competition, but that was pretty impressive coming from a wrestler. And that isn't the first time he threw an overhand while shooting for a takedown. That's the same move he used to finish Donovan Beard. And the overhand connected this time and then he took him down. I think that's very impressive because a lot of wrestlers just shoot blindly. Someone like Mateusz Gamrot, for instance, I don't think his wrestling is as good as that of Bo Nickal, or at least the way he initiates his takedowns. Maybe his wrestling's better, I don't know, but not the way he shoots for takedowns. Bo Nickal sets up his takedowns. He doesn't go for blind ones, and when he does go for a blind one, it's when he's already in the pocket and there isn't enough room for you to throw a knee or just defend the takedown in general. So that's what I like about him. A lot of his fights may end up being boring because he doesn't take a lot of risks. Notice how when Cody Brundage was advancing, Bo Nickal was backing up. He didn't want to initiate in any striking exchanges, and I guess he was disciplined. So yeah, I like that about him. And he also did use that same discipline against Paul Craig when he didn't want to initiate any grappling exchanges because he was afraid of the jiu-jitsu threat that Paul Craig had. And I think he's just taking the path of least resistance to victory, even if the crowd isn't really amused by that. And I don't really blame him for it because I think I would do the same. I'm someone who doesn't like losing. If I lose, it has to be because my opponent was better, not because I made a small mistake that I could have avoided. And Bo Nickal is the embodiment of that. But if I'm being completely honest with you, his fight against Paul Craig was very unimpressive because I would have expected him to get a takedown and at least control Paul Craig, maybe not land that much ground and pound, but use his wrestling. Clearly, there's something Bo Nickal knows about his wrestling that we don't. Maybe it's not as good as we once thought it was. Because when he fought Cody Brundage, I really wasn't that impressed. When he tried to take him down, he struggled quite a bit, but eventually got it in the second round. And let's be real, that was a dominant performance. We just expected more from him. But think of how Khamzat would fight Cody Brundage. Think of how he would ragdoll this guy. I really think he would lift him across the cage, take him down, and submit him in the first round. And it makes absolutely no sense because Khamzat's greatest achievement in wrestling is being a Swedish champion, whereas Bo Nickal has competed internationally and was the gold medalist for the Under-23 2019 championships. So yeah, I don't get how that works, but I guess this is MMA where glory champions get knocked out and where BJJ guys get submitted, where judo guys get tossed around, This is MMA, and I love that about it. It just makes it more unpredictable. And this could make me win more money in my parlays. So yeah, I take advantage of the randomness that it has. And I want you guys to let me know what you think about Bo Nickal's career so far and if you think he's going to become a champion or at least become a contender. Yeah, thanks for watching the video. Like and subscribe.